This is the Amp Hour Podcast, recorded September 2nd, 2015. Episode 265. A security update with Michael Ossmann.
Welcome to the Amp Hour. I'm Dave Jones from the EEV blog.
And I'm Chris Gamble of Contextual Electronics.
And I'm Michael Ossmann of Gray's Got Gadgets.
For our regular security update.
Regular security update. Is this a regular thing now?
It's semi-regular.
Yes, sir.
Quasi-regular.
Was I supposed to do homework for this?
Yes. You were supposed to attend a crap load of security conferences and tell us what's hot and what's not and what's going on.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I think what really happened is that Chris was looking around for someone to have on, and Mike just happened to be standing there. And
No way, man!
I've
I've got an email string from like 4 weeks ago, so I've been wondering about this stuff. So it was 4 weeks ago that I was short on guests, and then Mike couldn't
was
do
going,
it.
No,
So.
not me, not again. No.
Yeah, you emailed me right when I was in the middle of the horrible month of conferences.
Tell us about the horrible month of conferences. Where did you go?
It was actually a wonderful month.
Right.
A wonderful month of conferences, except that they all
Please make
were
me
in the same
entirely
month.
jealous, because as we were talking about before the show, I get to go to one conference a year, so.
Oh, yeah. So I did like 6 or 7 events in 1 month, which was kind of stupid, but they were really good events. I went to Black Hat and B-Sides and DEF CON in Vegas, and I went to
So those three
Usenix.
were in Vegas?
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're all in the same week.
Oh, right. Okay, well, that
Yeah.
makes it easy. Yeah, okay. Right, I thought you were like
And I
touring the world,
No. And I get there early to teach 4 days and at Black Hat, so I end up being in Vegas for way too long.
Yeah, turns into like Fear and Loathing.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of cool stuff happened there, though. I mean, tons of great research was presented.
Cool.
Excellent.
And then I was at Usenix Woot, the workshop on offensive technology.
Offensive
And-
Sorry?
Yeah.
Offensive,
Yep.
as in offensive
Right.
hacking.
Right.
Not like
I find
offensive
this
like Dave.
offensive. No,
Right.
yeah, exactly.
Right. Offense versus defense. And that's a wonderful little academic conference in the academic security community.
Well, tell us what these offensive things are. What constitutes an offensive technology,
any kind of-
hack technology?
Any kind of active attack, a hack on some software or hardware, as
Well, I
opposed
thought that's
to
pretty
a
much
way
everything. Every hack, isn't it? Every hack's offensive, isn't it?
Well, it depends. I mean, the hacker community, like going to DEF CON, for example, has been focused on attack tools and techniques for many years. But the academic community has been focused primarily on defensive research.
Right.
And so this is sort of a unique conference. Well, it's really a workshop within a larger conference. But it's a unique event in the academic community that it is totally focused on attack research as opposed to defense research.
So this is purely academic. This is like, university professors turning up
Right. Yeah.
and giving
Yeah,
their
but-
death by PowerPoint presentation.
Exactly. But I thought that they were some of the best presentations
Right.
that I saw all month. Actually, were at Usenix Woot.
So do you have to be a professor do you have to be a researcher to do that? Or can you just be a one-man band in your shed doing research?
You can be a one-man band
Right.
in your shed, but you do have to submit a paper.
Oh, right, of course. Yep.
Yeah. I did not submit a paper. I just got invited to do a talk. But
He's special,
'cause-
folks.
Yeah.
He does the
I
security
really
update, Dave. Come on.
Right, of course, on the Amp Hour, of course, he's famous, yeah.
That's clearly why.
Is this hardware and software at this? I know that DEF CON has hardware hacking village and Black Hat does because you do that thing there. But is Usenix Woot as well? Is that a
it's both hardware and software, definitely.
Okay.
There was an interesting car hacking talk there, and there was something on there was some stuff on like RFID systems, NFC security, and all kinds of interesting stuff that was actually hardware related.
The car thing was a big deal recently, wasn't it? Because the Chrysler Jeep hack? That was
one of them.
That made them recall it, didn't it? Oh, made them. Yes. I
recalled...
actually predicted that. Everyone said, I put that on Twitter. I said they'll have to do a recall. Everyone went, no way, won't happen. I was right.
Yep.
Thank you.
They finally did a recall. I think it was 2.5 million vehicles.
Wow. So it's just like a firmware
recall.
update, though, right? They just bring it back in and plug in the cable, and Bob's your uncle, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
And contrast that with another interesting car hack that was published in Vegas that was on Tesla, and Tesla, before the talk even happened, pushed out an over the air firmware update to fix a vulnerability in every single car, so they didn't have to do a recall.
But ironically,
Nice.
that is a potential way in for hackers, that over-the-air thing. So it's like, right? So
that is absolutely true.
So what's your gut feeling on that? Is it better to implement these things in hardware, or is it better to implement them in software and have cloud updated and all that sort of stuff? What's your...
You mean like firewalled versus non-firewalled?
Yeah, well, physical hardware.
Or air-gapped.
Like there is no link between the CAN bus and the internet gizmo in your car kind of thing. Like there's no physical connection. Can't happen.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think that ship has sailed.
Right. You think?
I mean,
Okay, right.
this debate was happening, internal to the automakers probably 10 years ago.
Right.
And the cars that are getting exploited today are ones that have already shipped and were designed at least 5 years ago.
Right, and they couldn't do remote update.
Well, most of them couldn't.
Right.
No, I think the only automaker that is doing over-the-air updates is Tesla.
Right.
And in general, I think that's a good way to go. I mean, there are obvious pros and cons, as you point out, but there are always going to be new vulnerabilities discovered in any sufficiently complex piece of software. And
is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. We are driving, rolling pieces of software.
Right.
So it's just inevitable that there are going to be problems, both security-wise and also reliability and safety, and those things.
That's why
they need to be fixed as fast as they possibly can.
Well, that's why I would err towards the hardware, because ultimately, the Tesla's doing the over-the-air updates, okay, but what's to stop anyone hacking into that system and doing their own updates? I mean, it's just an encryption thing that's stopping them, right?
Hear that, Mike? It's just an encryption
an authority
thing.
It's right? I mean, come
all
on,
you have to
right?
do
You know
is
what I'm talking
Dave
about.
Steen's movies.
Right?
You just go clickety clickety clack on the
that's right.
keyboard, and then stuff happens on the screen, and
well,
boom.
I've seen 24. I've seen what Chloe can do. Come on, it's too easy.
Well, encryption is hard to get right, and we've seen all kinds of things that appear to be secure systems deployed, and then somebody pokes a hole in them.
Which is why I'm arguing just take it out of the loop.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that's a design constraint, though, right?
I mean,
you think about
and it could be a selling point of your car. And
no,
my
I don't
one
think
is
so.
Not. It's so secure.
No, think about the fleet of people you need to maintain then in the event. Like, do you know how? I mean, like recalls are it's much better to say, okay, well we can update it later, and it's like versus maintaining a workforce.
But you don't have to
recall.
maintain it if you engineer it properly. If you engineer it properly from day one, Hardware,
You have to engineer
it
it
doesn't
properly.
change.
The OTA works. That's the thing, though. Like that's what's. I mean, like that argument always works. Like,
Yeah, but
oh,
no,
if
but
it's perfect, it's perfect.
the over-the-air is always hackable, always by definition. By definition.
ODB2 ports are accessible too. Like, why couldn't someone just go in there?
There's a huge differentiation between physical attack and software over-the-air attack.
There
Hacking.
is, absolutely.
Massive difference, Chris.
And this is one of the biggest kind of headlines about some of the recent car hacking, in particular the stuff done by Chris Valasek and Charlie Miller on the Jeep and the Chrysler vehicles, is that they published some research a couple years ago on how they were able to totally take control of a Toyota via physical access. They actually plugged into the CAN bus and showed how all these different subsystems in the car. Once you gain a foothold, all these different subsystems of the car are vulnerable. And a lot of people kind of poo-pooed that research and said, well, big deal. You had physical access. That's not that exciting. We don't really care about that. And so what they did was they kind of said, well, let's go back to the drawing board and figure out how we can demonstrate the same thing, but with a remote attack where we're anywhere over the internet. And we can attack a car, and that's exactly what they did with the Jeep hack.
But they found the only car that was probably vulnerable to that. One of the very few.
Well, they found 2.5 million vehicles that
but the same
are vulnerable.
Only
to the
2.5 million.
But out of how many model cars are on the market, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, they found They happened to find the one that had this vulnerability through the audio system or something. I don't know. It
was through the infotainment
system. Yep.
Yep. And so this was a case where I think most people, certainly people in the security industry, understand that this isn't the only vulnerability that exists in cars.
Certainly.
It's just the one that they happen to find and publish. And it's an excellent example to everyone to show that these cars are interconnected and they are vulnerable to attack from the outside world over the air, over a network. And
because they were poorly engineered.
Arguably, once somebody gains a foothold, then they can get access to control of the entire vehicle. And that's only going to get worse, most likely, as cars gain more drive-by-wire capabilities.
They're so aware of it now. Will they engineer them better? It could get better.
That's an excellent question, but the development life cycle for cars is so many years that, and the cars that are being engineered today or that were engineered last year aren't going to hit the market for a while. And they're already far more complex with more software, more lines of code, more microcontrollers than the ones that people are looking at and driving today.
Scary.
So could you explain what you mean by foothold? Because I'm not sure I understand that term.
You haven't watched enough movies, Chris. That's
I guess not. We can go over the list of movies I should watch after the actual explanation.
Just watch Sneakers. It's the only one you need to watch.
I've seen that one.
Love Sneakers.
So, basically, a car is a network of computers. There might be as many as 200 Turing machines inside your car. And because every single little subsystem in the car has its own microcontroller doing something, and they're all interconnected on a network. So it's kind of like attacking a car is kind of like attacking a corporate network of PCs. And if you can get one person to click on your malicious email, then you might be able to take over that one PC. And once you're there, that's your foothold into the internal network.
I see. So,
and you can gain access to other parts of that network. It's the exact same thing in a car. If you can gain access to the OnStar system or the entertainment system.
What's that? The On?
One of these remote telemetry and control systems.
They have like assistants, like you can push the button and they used to give you directions before the mapping programs were out there, that kind of thing.
Sorry, my car's not that advanced.
So, or you could gain access via Wi-Fi, for example, and because a lot of cars have Wi-Fi these days, or by Bluetooth, or there are all kinds of different ways that you could potentially gain access to one subsystem in the car. And once you have that, it turns out that pretty much every car is a fairly open network, or it might be architected so that there are 2 or 3 fairly open networks that are somewhat isolated from each other. But it doesn't take much to, generally speaking, it doesn't take much to go from a foothold or a control of one device on that CAN bus to gaining access or control over many devices on that CAN bus.
Right, because if you get onto the bus, then you can like start putting things into like, oh, well, you should load up new firmware, brake system, and then you push that new firmware system, then you have control of the brakes, and the brakes take over the windshield wipers, and the windshield wipers take over the engine timing, and
exactly.
That would be terrible if that was actually the order of things happening, but we have the best windshield wipers in the world. These are so intelligent.
Well, and the internal network is so wide open, or so lacking in security controls, because I don't know if you've ever looked at CAN bus, but it's just a dead simple protocol.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not much different than like a spy bus.
Yeah, you tug on a line,
exactly.
and then
that's
you're
it.
in control.
If you've got physical access to that line, bam, you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's scary. I was listening to the Tested podcast a while back, and they were talking about, they're not worried about the T1000 or anything like that. They're worried about autonomous cars, and then someone having access to the whole fleet of network-connected autonomous cars. And then you think about how many people that could hurt at once. And like, of course, that was a doomsday scenario, but even just one is a tragedy, right? And like
it is.
And like you said, as cars go more and more towards the drive-by-wire, moving away from physical controls, if your brake doesn't actually push onto hydraulic fluid to actually close the brake pad anymore, and it's controlled by computer now, you can really be in some shit,
Yep. And we've seen a little of this already. We've seen the dark side of what can happen to some extent with the Toyota unintended acceleration incidents.
Did they finally admit that? I
don't
followed it for a
Toyota-
little while, but
that's expensive to admit that.
right. I didn't get the final lowdown on that.
But there was a court case in which Toyota was found negligent,
right,
in a case of unintended acceleration that featured testimony and analysis, software analysis, and embedded system analysis by Michael Barr.
Yeah.
And he did a wonderful job. I highly recommend looking at his at the information that he published after that case about the research that he did on figuring out the software flaws that were very easily he couldn't prove, and no one could prove, that these software flaws were the direct cause of
I find that amazing
incident.
that they couldn't prove it. Can't they just order them to hand over the code and then analyze it? It's not fuzzy logic here. It's it's like code executes in certain ways. I mean,
yeah. Well, but there are so many different conditions. There's so many different possible input states that you can't fully recreate necessarily all the states that were the state of the system at the time of the accident or something.
Right. But you only have to prove one case. You only have to find and prove one case. That's it.
And he proved more than one case. He proved very clearly that there were software quality issues that could cause the exact problems that happened in this accident.
Right. So this is
And,
in the
yeah.
acceleration control computer or whatever it's called?
I can't remember exactly which system it was, if it was in the engine control unit or one or two other systems. But it's highly educational. I definitely recommend anybody involved
try and
in
link that in.
embedded systems check that out. Yeah, definitely. Let's try to remember to get that into the show notes.
Yeah.
Because it shows exactly what can happen when software goes bad. And the automakers have a long history of reliability testing. And they think they know how to test things for reliability, but the problem is they know how to test hardware for reliability. They're having to learn the hard way how to test software for reliability, and it's a much, much harder problem.
Well, that's always the curse of R&D, trying to test your own stuff. Like it's hard. The best thing you can do is simply give it to the crowd. And right.
Here you go, Grandma.
I take my scope, right? I take my scope and give it to my 4-year-old, right? And he'll play around with the scope and he'll put it in modes that I didn't even think existed, that you could possibly put this scope into, because he's just playing around with the thing. It's incredible. Yep. So, you can't beat crowd testing. Passionate crowd testing.
Baby testing, really. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Or toddler, whatever.
Monkeys bashing on keys,
That's right, exactly. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it is hard to, especially when you are plotting out, you have to have scientific method around, well, we tried A and the result was B, and, that's what we're going to try, and now we go to C.
You always miss something.
Right.
Well, clearly Toyota should let some toddlers loose on their cars for testing. That's the obvious answer here.
So there is like one vulnerability I'm particularly concerned about on the car front is that you might have some system hooked onto that CAN bus. It might be secure in its own respect, right? But then somebody who actually comes in and they might re-flash that thing either remotely or via some other method, and bam, and otherwise safe, thing, be it the entertainment system or be it the the air conditioning controller or whatever, because they're all micros. There are hundreds and hundreds of micros in a modern car.
Yep.
So you can go through any one of them. The flat tire sensor has a micro in it. And it hooks onto the bus and it reports back, right? All you've got to do is, put a wheel on there that has that that has a hacked sensor in it, and bingo, it's got access to the bus.
Yeah, and the tire pressure monitoring systems are one of the more interesting systems from a security and privacy standpoint these days.
Tell us why.
Well, you've got 4 sensors, one in each tire, and each one is independently transmitting periodically a radio signal to a centralized controller. I mean, radio is the easiest way to get information out of
moving wheel, yeah.
Right, out of the inside of a moving
the
wheel.
Keeps
right?
getting twisted up every time we put it on there. Yeah.
How do they get power for that? Is it there's a energy harvesting thing there that?
No,
I'm just curious.
I think they just have a battery that runs for years.
Oh,
Yep,
right,
it is.
really? Okay.
I remember my mom used to get signals, and they'd be like, "Yeah, you just got to replace the tire sensor," and it's like, that's kind of crappy design. So we just never knew if our tires were flat, which is the same as every other car after that,
Right. Yeah. And these tire pressure monitoring systems, they transmit a unique ID and the pressure and temperature of the tire. And then there's some controller inside the car that's a receiver that gets that information and interprets it and can tell you if you have a tire that's low, and it can tell you which tire is low, and assuming that they were enrolled to the car properly. And it can also do like a flat tire detection or if you have a blowout.
It's pretty
and-
bloody obvious that you've got a blowout. Why do we need a freaking
know.
sensor to tell us?
What is that noise? Why am I pulling off to the right? Something's wrong.
Yeah, I think it's primarily so that blowout information can get stored in a black box or transmitted via telemetry system.
Right.
So
if you
yeah,
crash and kill somebody, they can get the data and go, yep, okay, it wasn't your fault, the tyre burst,
yeah.
Right.
I've looked a little bit at some of the tire pressure monitoring systems myself, and I haven't found any place where it looks like it could be exploited to like gain arbitrary control, like send arbitrary CAN bus messages.
Well, I was
or
going to
like
say,
gain
is that?
control of a
You're talking about the
computer.
control. I was going to say, is that just because it's a receiver and that's it, and it's just it ignores everything else except the tire pressure level, or whatever?
Yeah, that's basically true, and also because it's a very simple receiver.
Right.
Every case that I've looked at, the packet format of these tire pressure monitors is very fixed, and it's like a fixed number of bytes, and it's a very small number of bytes, and there isn't much there. It's not like It's not like the tire pressure monitor is transmitting a complete CAN bus packet.
Yeah, exactly.
For example.
Yeah.
So if the tire pressure monitor were transmitting a complete CAN bus
you
packet,
could
then
hack
that would be a
Yeah.
huge avenue of attack.
Massive, yeah.
But I haven't found any that do that kind of thing.
All you need is someone from the government to come along and just while you're inside, just secretly change your tire, and bam, that's it. They're hacked. They're in.
Yeah.
They can cause your car to crash, and oh, he had an accident. Oops.
Yeah. Well, and it might be possible. I mean, I don't know, especially as we get into more self-driving cars, or at least assisted driving. It might be possible to really mess up somebody's vehicle on the highway by spoofing a tire and making the car think that it had a blowout.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would think it'd be easier to like overload sensors and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I'm sure they test for that stuff, but like thinking, like how a lot of cars are doing like avoidance like type stuff, so it'll help you swerve out of the way if it like senses there's something there. Just faking that thing out. That would be probably the easiest way to do that. You know what? I mean, basically, you roll a ball in front of a car or something like that, and then you just
Right.
put a barrier next to it, and I don't know.
Why not go the whole hog and just want to use one of those EMP pulse generators they use in Ocean's 11? When he switches it on and
A pinch.
a pinch. That's
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, our cars are getting highly vulnerable to those things. I mean, heck, even cars from late 20th century were vulnerable to
Do you
something like
think
that, potentially.
that they're solar flare vulnerable? Because that is a modern day disaster scenario that is seriously waiting to happen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, was it back in the 30s or something? Solar flare took out the entire power grid in like 10 countries or something. It's like,
Yeah.
are they safe because they're shielded inside a car, and they haven't got big loop areas in them? They're all tiny surface mount stuff. I don't know.
That probably helps. It also helps that cars are so electrically noisy inherently that the electronics inside cars are pretty well engineered against pretty big electrical
load
pulses.
dumps.
They're all pretty much in die-cast boxes, aren't they? Every one of these little controllers I seem to see in a car is like die-cast box.
Yeah, they're pretty well isolated, and they're physically very reliable. So I would guess that our cars, even though they're getting more and more complex and more full of computers, I would guess that they're going to be less vulnerable to EMPs than most of the other electronics we have in our lives.
Like the lights, like the traffic lights. So you'd probably have more accidents if there was a huge solar flare event or someone let a nuke off nearby or something that, or the traffic lights go down. suddenly, and
Might be
boom,
other
and then all
problems
the
if
cars
someone
crash.
lets off a nuke off
Yeah,
nearby.
nuke
Dave.
nearby, but you know, yeah, but,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
The whole
we're just talking technical here.
boom part.
Yeah. But I think the first things to go would be your cell phone and your laptop and
Yeah,
the
right.
your all your internet access. And,
Pacemaker.
Oh no, our entire
Oh.
lives are
Yeah.
the internet, not the internet.
So, Mike, what are some other trends you're seeing? I mean, like, so we saw. I mean, you were talking about cars. Obviously, that's big. Were there other big talks about, other trends and stuff that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest trends in the security industry right now is actually more of a focus on hardware.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, there's a whole new conference coming up that I mentioned before the show, hardware.io, hardwear.io. That's coming up, and it's just another sign of the times that so many people in the security industry are focused on hardware and are focused on embedded systems, really.
Are we talking about consumer hardware here?
Yeah, well, consumer and also industrial, and any place there's an embedded system, there's a potential security problem, and we're seeing a lot of cases where, let's say, the auto industry is a good example, but there are many other industries where any industry that makes any physical good is going through a change right now. They're somewhere along this curve of putting microcontrollers into their physical good, right?
Well,
Everything's
one of the
getting
big ones
quote
is
unquote
smart TVs. Smart.
Yep.
Everyone is complaining.
Totally.
There's a new movement going. I will not have a smart TV because the government's going to be monitoring me through the camera and the microphone and blah blah blah. You know, like there's a huge backlash on smart TVs for that.
And there was some wonderful research presented a couple of years ago on smart TVs and how, like, Based, a hacker from South Korea, did a wonderful demonstration with a Samsung smart TV, where he was able to, remotely take over the TV and run his own code on it and attack other hosts on the network from that TV.
I was going to say, because it's hooked onto your Wi-Fi network.
Make you watch the Kardashians.
You're
It could potentially interfere with what you're watching, but the more insidious thing that he was able to do is operate a camera and microphone.
Yeah.
And what made it particularly insidious is that he was able to make the TV look like it was being powered off without actually powering it off.
Oh, and still operating the mic and camera.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, security monitoring.
Wow, that's a
effectively.
nice hack.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
Jeez.
Since that happened, I don't think it's really gotten any better. There are just more and more smart TVs coming out every day, and there isn't anyone doing comprehensive security audits on all of them and publishing their results. So it's a dangerous thing, I think, putting one of these smart TVs in your home.
There you go, folks.
I do not fault people who would refuse to buy one. It's definitely a concern. I mean, honestly, I've unplugged them myself when I find them in a hotel room.
Really?
Interesting. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I just unplug them from the wall. Just because, I mean, it's one thing to have one in my own home and under my own control, and if I'm hacking around on it or something, but one that's that I've never seen before, that's just in my hotel room, pointed at my bed. I don't really.
That's interesting. Do you find yourself? I don't want to use the word paranoid, but you're aware. You're security aware. Do you find yourself doing that for other things, or what?
There's definitely a fine line between security aware and paranoid.
Mike, there's people listening to you right now. I don't know if you knew about that.
No. I'm maybe a little more paranoid than most, but probably not any more than most other folks in the security industry. I just think of it as being sensible. If I walk into a room and I'm going to be spending a lot of time in that room on my own, as my own private space, and there's a computer with a microphone and a camera just sitting there plugged into the wall, and I'm not planning on using it. I'm just going to unplug it.
It's just interesting. Okay.
It's easy. It's safe. And
so I'm just sitting here wearing this tinfoil hat. I'm not crazy. I'm just being sensible.
Yeah, exactly. Even on my laptop. I mean, and I'm pretty confident in the fact that nobody is running malicious code on my laptop. But even though I'm pretty confident about that, I still have a Band-Aid taped over the camera.
Wow.
Okay. Because I never
somebody
use the
who
camera.
sits here in a lab with people watching me 24/7,
Right.
it's like, it's like care factor.
Well, that's a little
kind of
different.
Zero.
Yeah. But I never use the camera, and if I did, then maybe I wouldn't bother covering it over. But it's one of these things where, why would I bother? Why would I make that available?
Right.
If I'm not actually going to use it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Tinfoil hats for everyone, folks. Maybe we can have the official Amp Hour tinfoil hat.
Oh, that would be excellent.
That would be a great, great item.
So does anyone turn up to these conferences with a tinfoil hat? That'd be hilarious.
I have actually seen that.
You have? Oh,
It does.
awesome, yes. Photos or it didn't
does
happen? Photo?
I don't think I have a photo, but no, this is a thing.
Yeah, they get cranky at DEF CON when you take
in
photos
your show bag.
without asking.
Show
Oh,
bag.
yeah.
Oh, really? So
yeah.
maybe in your show bag you get a tinfoil
Oh,
hat
that would be good,
one year.
yeah.
That'd be great.
Hey, we should make something like Teespring, but for tinfoil hats.
Oh,
Branded for your corporation.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got an idea. Okay. Right, I'm going to implement
it would be
after the
great
show.
to have
It's
it
okay.
like an NSA branded tinfoil hat or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
That would be great.
What's this microphone looking thing on here? I don't get it.
Oh, boy.
Well, so speaking of, I think Dave said something about a badge as well. We should mention that. So you were at another conference, and well, you should just tell us about the badge because we mentioned it on the show. But tell us all about it.
Oh yeah, the radio badge at Chaos Camp. It was amazing, and this was one of the events I went to within the last month, and it was the Chaos Communications Camp in Germany. About 4,500 people. I think it was close to 5,000 people.
Wow.
All camping in a field. And
nerds in tents.
Yeah, nerds in tents. It was a lot of nerds in tents. It was a really good time, and the Munich CCC group brought badges for everybody, and they designed this thing, the radio badge. It's spelled RAD10. Radio badge. It's kind of designed to look sort of like an AM/FM radio or something like that, and it was actually based on my HackRF1 design. So they made 4,500 of these and gave them away to all these hackers in the field. 4,500 HackRFs.
Wow, how much did they cost a pop?
It was amazing. So turns out that they were able to get some significant sponsorship from chip vendors.
Oh, nice.
And
yeah.
So for this event, and they were able to, thanks to that sponsorship, they were able to reduce the cost down significantly to the point where they could just roll it into the cost of the camp.
Wow,
and
terrific.
And give one away to everybody. Yeah, it was tremendous. And they had to redesign a few things on the board because they were designing
That's common,
around.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were designing
what
around
parts you can get for
the
free.
parts that could get donated. Exactly. Yeah. So. There were a few things that when I looked at the design, I was like, why in the world did they do that? And then I realized, it's because they got a chip from this certain vendor.
Yep. Use what you got, folks.
Yep. So they did a great job of making that happen at a low cost and giving it away to everybody and kind of promoting software-defined radio in the community, more than I had ever been able to. And like, when I first did the HackRF project, when I really started working on the HackRF project, and I started working on the beta board, which was called Jawbreaker, my original plan for Jawbreaker was to make about 500 of them and give them away to a bunch of hackers in a field. And that was the plan. We were going to do it at Tour Camp in the U.S., which is a smaller hacker camp. But due to being behind schedule, we weren't able to actually accomplish that goal. We did make 500 jawbreakers, actually about 600 jawbreakers, and give them away to people, which was great. But we didn't get to give them away to people who are all in the same place at the same time, and I missed out on actually making that happen and experiencing that. And so, thanks to the Munich CCC crew, I was able to actually finally experience that 10 times the scale, and walk around and talk to people about what they were doing with the radio badge, and it was amazing. It was pretty incredible experience.
I wonder about that because I've seen I went to DEF CON. I saw you there a little bit last year, but that's a much bigger, and the badge has stuff, but there's not really. And some people do badge hacking, but I didn't really see too much, like in terms of the scale. And so, like, what were people doing, and how, like, what percentage would you say?
So, obviously there are a lot of people who get the thing and don't do anything with it, and hopefully those people will go back after the camp and try them out, or loan them to a friend who wants to play with it or something, or donate them to their local hackerspace. Somehow, get them to somebody who wants to play with them. But there were a lot of people there at camp who were working with them and trying new things. There were people who had downloaded my instructional videos and were using the radio badge to go through the exercises that are in my videos. There were people who were writing firmware for the badges to do all kinds of fun stuff.
Awesome.
A little bit of hardware hacking, but I didn't see a whole lot of that. There were some unpopulated components on the board, just like LEDs and stuff, and LEDs and like a external antenna connector. So a lot of people were soldering. They were soldering on either the antenna connector, or they were just soldering on temporary antennas.
Where do they get the power from at these camps? Does everyone bring their own generator, or is it one of these powered campsite thingies?
They had some very large generators.
Right.
To power the entire
that's
camp.
supplied by the event, is it?
Exactly.
Right, and everyone can just plug in with 1 million power boards.
That's
all
camping, is that
series.
right? Is there? I know there's glamping, which is glamorous camping. Is there like namping, like for nerd camping, where you need to have power and internet,
yeah, Wi-Fi and everything? Yeah.
Namping
why aren't we just at a hotel?
Exactly what was going on. Well, I love it. You know what? I think this might have been my favorite event that I've ever been to. And part of that, of course, is influenced by the fact that the radio badge was such an amazing thing for me personally to see come to fruition. But part of that was just the camp itself, nothing to do with the radio
beer,
badge.
I'm sure.
I'm not sure that I had any German beer at the camp, but there was alcohol, definitely, and there was plenty of Club Mate, and there was just a lot of really cool, interesting installations, like light shows and stuff, and people doing interesting projects and giving talks about all kinds of cool stuff, and just nerdery all over the place. It was amazing.
It makes me want to run one.
Oh yeah,
here in Sydney.
It's
Chaos Communications Camp, Australia, now with more spiders and drop bears.
Should I run my own, or should I franchise the Chaos Computer Camp? Is it franchisable?
I don't think it's franchisable exactly, but you know what you should do is just come to one of the hacker camps on some other continent and see how it goes. Either come to the Chaos Camp or come to Tour Camp in the US or EMF Camp in the UK. Go to one of these hacker camps and see what it's like, because I personally find that these are some of the best events that I go to. I like them a lot more than the conferences that are in hotels
at the exhibition centers and yeah.
There's something special about camping with all these people, and even if it's not quite your traditional idea of camping, like at Chaos Camp, for example, I didn't bring any food. I bought food from food vendors while I was there.
Oh, they got vendor. Well, with
Yeah.
5,000 people, I'm sure the vendors would show up. If I ran one
Right.
here, we might get 5 people to show up.
So basically, I just showed up with a tent and a sleeping bag. Actually, I just showed up with a sleeping bag because somebody offered to loan me a tent. So you just show up with a tent and a sleeping bag and your laptop, and you and it's amazing because for one reason because it's so affordable. Everybody camping in a field is way more affordable than everybody staying in a hotel room.
Yep.
And
totally.
So you're able to get, it's very, very inclusive. Anybody can show up at this camp. And it's also 24/7. So like a lot of the most interesting conversations that I had were after dark. And earplugs are pretty much required.
Buddy, come on, take a look at this. Come on, 2 a.m. in the morning. Come on, step into my tent. Come on.
Right.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I was soldering on things and hacking on things and help talking to people about their hacks and stuff. Well after midnight, every night while I was there, and a lot of the stuff, a lot of the interesting installations that people have are like lighting displays that only operate at night. So it's very much focused on the nighttime, and you just get kind of a different community feeling from folks that you're camping with, even if it is a bit of a non-traditional camp. I think they're great events.
Is it mostly like hacking type stuff, or is it being taken over by the makers in quote marks?
I would say that it's a pretty strong mix, but
right.
the security focused people are not. I would not say are the majority.
Oh, okay, right, yep.
As
well,
opposed
I
to
wouldn't
a lot
have
of the
imagined with
conferences.
5,000 people. No, I wouldn't. I thought it'd just get more. It'd just be a popular thing, and like you'd just get makers turning up with their flashing LED lights there,
Yep.
Right. If I'm running one, should I?
You put a nugget in Dave's head now. It's not, this
you
isn't
bastard.
good. Yeah.
Should it be focused like that, or it should be come one, come all, kind of thing, or no, you've got to bring a hack.
I think making it less focused can be a good thing, personally.
Right.
Because then you get people that are
it
interested
makes it
coming
bigger,
in,
right,
make it
yeah,
open. Yeah, I think that's a good
Right.
call.
So you rather call it like a maker event than a hacker event.
Yeah, you could absolutely.
Is hacker still a bad word? Is it like, because
Not to me.
they used to be hacker spaces, right? And now, when they first started, now they're maker spaces, like they're rebranded, right?
Some have, but I
Some
think
have, yeah.
most that have called themselves hackerspaces continue to call themselves hackerspaces.
Right.
And
I think that's too much navel gazing, to be completely honest. I think who cares? Like
right.
like these identities. It's like you're worried about that, and meanwhile, all these people over here are like actually doing things. Why don't you
Doing
just do
stuff.
what they're
Yeah,
doing?
yeah,
right.
I mean, like that's the big thing. So yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I love about these hacker camps in general is that they are very inclusive and that they have more of a focus on the community and on things like art projects, as opposed to the conferences that I go to that tend to be very focused on security only. And the camps, sure, there are people who are presenting interesting security work, but then there are also people who are just building stuff. There are people who are just teaching people how to solder. There are people who are making art installations. There's just a wide variety of people. And generally, those art installations are technological art installations, which is why you see a lot of lighting stuff. But it's very open and inclusive and more community focused than focused on any one topic.
That's good. I like that. Yeah. I think the logistics on that stuff must be crazy. I'm very...
Yeah, that's what I'm not looking at. It's just going through my head at the moment, going, shit, how do I actually organise an event? Insurance, got to find a space. Is this camp like in a public, like, reserve kind of thing, or is it like a private?
This particular one is in a public space.
Right, okay.
But I've been to camps that are in private spaces as well.
I think a private might be easier to get approval for. You just pay somebody. We would love to use your farm, please. You know,
Exactly.
And here's a couple of grand to use your farm. You know, like rather than try and go through local council approval and national. But I've held it up in the mountains. You know, that'd be a fantastic place. But it'd be in a national or state park. You know, and it's like Can you imagine the red tape to?
Yeah, especially in the U.S., I think that would be hard to do.
Right.
Whereas in Germany, I don't know, they make it work.
Well, see, that's like I go to all these obstacle course events. These 5, 10 kilometer, 20 kilometer, mud obstacle events. Right? They're always on private property. Because they just pay, it's easier, I think. They just pay the landowner to, can we use your paddock, and they just turn it into a mud pit.
Right.
And it's just, you can't exactly do it in a national park.
We'll fill the holes in before we go, we promise.
Well, and that might be a great place to start if you're looking around for a location to host an event, is look for places that have hosted other types of events like that.
Yep. Yeah, because they'd be, conducive to it.
You heard here first, folks. Dave is going to be sitting in the middle of a field with a soldering iron and a guitar on his knees singing Kumbaya.
Kumbaya, that's it.
And you know what? I will say this publicly. If Dave actually pulls this stuff together, I will fly out there. I will be there. And I hate camping.
Oh,
all right.
There you go.
And I hate spiders. We know this.
There you go.
I'll
Chris
be there.
has agreed. Right.
Yeah.
We're going to hold you to that.
I would like to be there too, but I'm not sure I can commit
this summer.
to it.
All right.
Yeah, this summer. Don't do it in the summer. Don't do it in the high summer. You don't want to sleep in a tent when it's 40 degrees C.
It's spring
night.
here now. It's
do it in the fall. That's what I mean. Do the fall.
Yeah, perfect.
All right.
Anyway,
done.
So Mike, what else? So that's really great though about that badge. I think that kind of stuff too. I remember with the Open Hardware Summit badge from 2 years ago, the Wyolum one. I saw that one kind of popping up in projects a couple times over and over because it's like an e-ink badge, stuff like that.
Right.
I'm sure that same kind of thing. It just kind of propagates. It's in not the junk bin, but it's on the bench, and it's like, oh, I could use this for this, and then it's just kind of there. So it should be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah, I hope we'll see similar things with the radio badge.
Yeah. What about so you had mentioned the hardware conference, the hardware.io conference, and you said there's other ones as well. I mean, I'm always interested in this stuff because spoilers, I'm kind of setting up one first off. And I'm not going to talk about it here, but yeah, I'm stupid and setting up something.
Nice.
Excuse me. I got all choked up just talking about it because of logistics. But, hardware doesn't really seem to have just hardware stuff. You mentioned this hardware security conference, this new one. That's good. But what are some of even the other security ones? Because it seems like those are becoming more and more for hardware.
Yeah, well, some stuff that's coming up. Of course, you just mentioned the Open Hardware Summit. That's coming up.
All right. Yep.
And there's an interesting open source silicon conference coming up. That's the OpenRISC. You guys have talked about the OpenRISC project on the show before. They're making an open source microcontroller, basically based on the RISC-V platform. And they aspire to be the first open source silicon product that actually is available through traditional electronics distributors. It's a really exciting project, and they're having their conference, ORConf. If you go to openrisk.io/ORConf, ORCONF, that's a conference that's coming up in October at CERN, and it's started by the OpenRISC group, but they're really trying to make it a more general event for anybody who's interested in open source silicon, which I think is super exciting. I would like, personally, as an open source hardware developer, I would like to have more components that I use be open source silicon. And I'm interested in maybe getting into open source silicon development myself. I think in the long term, it's an area that we as an open source hardware community need to go to.
I totally agree.
So that's an exciting thing that's coming up. Of course, there's.
So you're saying fewer black boxes in the little black boxes that we already use? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. T-shirt slogan or something. Right?
Yeah, fewer black boxes in my black box. Something like that. Yeah. I think you're onto something. Hey, maybe
Hell no, we won't go.
maybe can I get a custom tinfoil hat with that printed on it?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yes.
Yeah. Folds back on itself.
Yeah, so those are
And
some
so
of the things coming up that I'm excited about. Of course, there are plenty of security conferences. I think the main one that I have on my schedule coming up is TourCon in San Diego. But yeah, there are always.
There's no tour camp this year, is that right?
Not this year, no. But there should be one next year. That's an every other year thing.
Oh, okay. And is that the same thing for the Chaos Camp as well?
Chaos
is that every
Camp
other?
It's sort of every other. It's actually every fourth year. But then there is also a hacker camp in the Netherlands that is every 4 years, and they're on alternating schedules. So every 2 years there is a large hacker camp in Europe.
Cool.
If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So 2017 Netherlands.
Yeah.
Sleep in a tent.
Right.
Solder something.
Yeah.
Don't solder your tent.
Yeah. But next year there should be next summer there should be a tour camp in the US, and there should be an EMF camp in the UK. Those are the hacker camps that I know of that I expect to happen within the next year.
Cool. So how goes the you've still been teaching all your SDR stuff. How's that going? I mean, are you still developing a bunch of new content for that and still teaching with the HackRF? Obviously with the HackRF, but like is there a new HackRF coming out or a Daisho? What's the update on that stuff?
Yeah, so I've been teaching a lot. I haven't done as many videos as I would like to, but I'm still working on my online video series, and I should be able to get a new episode up this month, definitely. But I think I have 9 videos so far, and I'm doing my 2-day class a lot, and I've also done some private kind of advanced SDR classes, for people who've already been through my 2-day class and want to learn more. And those end up being fairly custom, depending on the interests of the students. But it's a lot of fun. I just did one of those actually in Germany last week, which was my second trip to Germany this month, which is stupid, but don't do that.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun to talk to some folks who kind of accomplish some things with SDR and work on some more interesting projects, more esoteric things, or kind of advanced concepts, and some of that will hopefully eventually make its way into my online video series as well. So it's a kind of a good chance when I do those private classes to kind of develop some new content that I can later make available to everyone. But
cool.
HackerF is going strong. I mean, the biggest news in the HackerF front lately, of course, is the radio badge at CCC. I heard a rumor recently that there's going to be a HackerF 2. But I don't know anything about it. I don't know where this rumor came from.
So it goes with open source hardware, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
Well, someone's grabbing that ball and running.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, if I make a HackerF 2, which is an if at this point, it's not a when. It's just a general concept that I have in my head that I've been talking to people about here and there. Privately,
so it's a different concept, or is it just a bigger, beefier HackerF?
It's a slightly different concept. The idea with HackerF 2, if it does come to fruition, my idea that I'm kind of leaning toward at this point, or my concept that I'm leaning toward, is to take the radio that's in HackerF 1 and keep it. Don't change it at all, and just change the digital back-end section, and put in a bigger, beefier microcontroller that can actually run embedded Linux, and replace the USB interface with a gigabit Ethernet interface and support power over USB. Power over Ethernet. So
you could do a USB 3.0 too.
We could, but that's not what I'm going with right now. So
Yeah, but by the time you get to it, right? That's what I'm saying.
well, maybe, yeah. So I mean, basically the idea is to have the exact same radio capabilities, but just in an embedded platform as opposed to in a peripheral. And
Right.
Yeah.
that's because there are a whole lot of people who show up in the HackerF IRC channel who are like, I'm working on this project where I'm connecting my HackerF1 to a BeagleBone Black or to a Raspberry Pi or to something, some kind of an embedded Linux platform. And it would really make sense to have that all be one board.
Huh. That's interesting. Why? Yeah, I guess you could. I mean, because right now that's still it's USB connected. Is that right? It just streams over USB. Because you could also do like, I mean, if you did choose the BeagleBone Black, you could just refactor it onto a like a cape. That's what they call those, right? Like,
you could make sort of a HackerF cape for the BeagleBone Black, and that's basically what I want to make. Except BeagleBone Black has a couple of significant limitations for that particular application. And one of them is that BeagleBone Black only has 10100 Ethernet. It doesn't have gigabit Ethernet. And so you would actually have a significant downgrade in speed from USB 2.0 down to gigabit Ethernet or to 10100 Ethernet. And for those cases where you want to do everything on the embedded platform, it should work great. But for a case where you'd prefer to actually stream those digitized radio samples over to somewhere else over a network, it's not such a good solution.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So, and that's, but that is definitely something that I considered. Like maybe that would make sense. And if somebody wanted to do that'd be a cool thing. I'd love to see somebody make a HackerF.
You could build another cape on top of it because they stack, and you
could
put although passing high frequency signals through 0.1 inch headers is not always the best idea.
Yeah, and I don't think. I mean, because the microcontroller in the BeagleBone Black, which is, I hesitate to even use the word microcontroller because it's so big.
Oh, the PRU.
It has the ARM.
The
ARM.
Okay. You're saying like
it has a gigabit Ethernet MAC. But it's just the PHY chip that's on the BeagleBone Black is a 10100.
Cost savings.
Right, because it's like an extra
right?
$2 to make it gigabit at least. So, multiply that by your profit margins and your supply chain, and like that's a big difference,
right?
Especially
when they were trying to compete with the $35 Raspberry Pi. So
yeah.
All right.
So that's what kind of led me to
data on how many HackRF1s you've sold.
Oh yeah, I've sold close to 10,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Nice.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So and then I gave away about 600 of the beta boards, and then the radio badge guys gave away 4,500, and I don't know how many clones have sold, but there are some clones out there. So altogether, there's probably something like 20,000 HackerFs in the world, which is pretty cool.
That's very cool, and it's not a particularly cheap product as well. SparkFun sell it for $2.99.
Yeah,
it's it's not like it's not a $30 impulse buy.
Right.
It's That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What's this deal that SparkFun have got on their website here? This product has some level of export control restriction, so expect delay when shipping outside of the US.
Yeah,
Is that because of the transmission?
I need to check on that with them, actually, because it shouldn't really be an export issue, but it may be an import issue. It certainly is a problem in many countries. For example, I just got an email from SparkFun today about a customer who's trying to buy one of these from India, and the Indian government doesn't want to let it in. So
is that because it's a hacking device, or is that because it's not an approved transmission?
It's because it's a radio frequency device, right?
Right.
And so India is just one of many countries. I mean, every country probably has some amount of regulation about what radio equipment you're allowed to have or
I suspect that if you tried to sell it here and you asked for permission, they'd probably deny it.
Yeah.
Because it's a broadband transmitter, right?
Maybe.
Yep.
From 1 meg to 6 gig.
Right. Now,
Right?
In most countries, and definitely in the U.S. and throughout Europe, there are exceptions for test equipment, and
Right.
so as long as I'm able to say that my product is a test equipment, then,
it isn't consumer. No, it's
right. Then I can legitimately import that product to a lot of different countries. But there are some countries that may not have that sort of exemption, and it could be very difficult to get that kind of equipment into those countries, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah. Did you guys see this stuff about the FCC? I not to change the subject.
Oh
too
yeah,
much,
no,
but
this is a good topic.
So could you explain it for me? I keep reading about it, and I'm just like I know you can't. They're talking about you can't install OpenWRT, which is that open source firmware version that goes onto those blue routers, right? And
Yep.
So what is the deal with that? I mean, does that actually affect your product at all, or no?
No. And the reason it doesn't affect my products is because of the test equipment exemption. But this affects everyone who makes or who sells equipment that is radio equipment in the U.S. So that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And what's going on is the FCC has recently published an NPRM, a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, that totally overhauls their equipment authorization procedures. And this is the first major overhaul of the equipment authorization in I want to say in this century. So it's been quite a few years.
Which sounds like not much, and then you're like, oh shit, yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
There's kids in high school that were born in this century.
Right. Yeah. So it's
scary.
They're really like if you go and you look at an FCC ID on a product, or if you're involved in getting an FCC ID for your product, that ID is something you get with your equipment authorization, and they're totally overhauling the process for equipment authorization. And so they have out right now a proposed rule, which is a large document that and there's an open comment period right now that's only open until the 8th of September. So I highly recommend that anybody who's interested in this, and if you are somebody who works for a company that makes a device that has an FCC ID, then you should be interested in this. Or
if you like messing around with stuff that's already been made,
true.
Stuff like that.
Yeah,
Right? I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that folks in the open source community have noticed recently that is kind of a big deal in this proposed rule is that equipment that can have that has a radio that is under software control, which of course is most radios these days, right?
Yeah, every cell phone in everyone's pocket.
Yeah, if you have a radio that's under software control, then the FCC says going forward they want you, the manufacturer, to implement security procedure, some kind of security mechanism to prevent the end user from modifying that software in such a way that it can change the operation of the radio.
I can see why they're doing that. I can totally see why they want to do it.
Yeah, I can see why too.
Why? Sorry.
Well,
oblivious.
I mean,
Chris.
the FCC's main job here that they're concerned about, the reason that they're in the equipment authorization business, is to ensure that we all get along and share the spectrum effectively.
Right.
Yes. No, you can't have anyone coming along, just spewing out RF everywhere.
Right.
It'd just
I
ruin
was a
everything.
900 megahertz transmitter. Now I'm not.
Exactly. Yep. That's exactly what they're concerned about. And so they have, and interestingly, I made a comment. This is years ago when I was working for the NTIA. I
Who's the
Oh,
NTIA?
the National Telecommunication and Information Administration. It's a
Obviously.
different government agency in the U.S. and actually, it's one of two agencies that does spectrum management in the U.S. Everybody knows about the FCC doing spectrum management, but the FCC only does spectrum management for non-government users of the spectrum. The
right. I had no idea.
NTIA does the spectrum management for
Oh.
government users of the spectrum. So there's a lot of back and forth between the two
You
agencies.
don't want them knocking on your door.
No. So
Do you guys have like softball games against one another?
I don't know. I mean, I just worked for like the remote little research lab of the NTIA. That was not.
Whoever scores the next run gets the new white space and gets to manage it for users.
Yeah, that might help actually.
Yeah, right. Make more sense than like legislation around
yeah,
it, right?
totally.
Right.
So back when I was working for the NTIA, the FCC introduced a new rule for software-defined radio, where they wanted software-defined radios to that were going through equipment authorization. They wanted them to implement some kind of security measure to prevent users from modifying the radio parameters. And I, on behalf of the NTIA at the time, drafted a comment to the FCC saying how horrible this would be for open source. And it really stifles the development of open source software-defined radio systems because you can't really be open source and lock out your users at the same time. That's just not possible, right? So, of course, they ignored that, and that rule has been in place for some time for SDR systems. And now what's happening is that they're taking a similar rule and applying it to non-SDR systems, really to any radio system that has any kind of software control. So it's become, it's popped up on the radar of a lot more people, specifically those who make a habit of putting custom software on 802.11 wireless routers, which is an extremely popular thing to do.
Yeah, right.
So
for security purposes, sometimes too. It's not like it's not malicious. It's like, hey, I just want to make this so I actually can control the things that I want to control.
Yep. I want to have more control over my network, and it's not necessarily that people are doing things like running their network on illegal frequencies, although that may be possible in some cases. The vast majority of people who are running open source software on their wireless routers are making absolutely no changes to the radio profile, the spectrum that's being used. They're only making changes that affect the network side of things, higher up in the stack. And it's a wonderful thing that people are able to take off-the-shelf, low-cost equipment and build much better software in some cases, software with better security in many cases, on top of these platforms. And that entire ability to do that is being threatened by this proposed rulemaking. So that's why folks are concerned about it right now.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend it, even if you're not working for a manufacturer that deals with that needs to get equipment authorized. If you're just somewhere who cares about open source,
make a submission.
I would definitely recommend getting online and checking out this NPRM. And there's an open comment period right now. Anybody can go make a comment on federalregister.gov.
Can I make a? Can I actually ask people, if you are going to do that, these government agencies which ask for comment and stuff like that, you have to be professional in your remarks to them, in your comments to them, and present a proper sound case. You can't just go in there and comment, "Oh, this is shit." Like you can't just be like a YouTube comment, right? You've got to, right? You've got to do a formal submission. Otherwise, it just it just ruins the process, ruins it for everyone. So
that's an excellent point.
There was a letter on Reddit. Someone had basically said, "Here's what I'm going to be posting," kind of like as a form for it.
Oh, right, yeah.
Just like because a lot of people don't know that kind of thing, and it's just kind of being able to see that.
So a lot of companies do that. They'll put it. Here's a form mail. Here's how to write a letter to your local politician. Please sign. Look, we'll give you the template. You just fill it in, and it's like how to be nice and polite and play the system.
Yep.
So,
I definitely am on board with that. There are some other things in this NPRM that I haven't even read yet, but that I think are interesting potentially. So I have more reading to do before I make my comment, but I'll definitely be making a comment at some point within the next few days. But like one thing that apparently is changing is the practices around the confidentiality of information that is submitted to the FCC during equipment authorization.
Right.
And this is something that I've noticed for a long time as a reverse engineer and as a user of the public information that the FCC makes available through the equipment authorization database. It's a wonderful resource for.
Oh, it is. You get these for like the new, like the Macintosh fanboys, for example. Oh, there's a new they'll just sit there and trawl the FCC website to see if they've submitted any new products.
Right.
Trying to
So it's a great resource, and if changing the practices about how that information can be kept confidential, that might mean that less information will be available to the public in the future. I don't.
That's good and bad.
Right. So that's an area of the rules that I intend to take a closer look at before I make my comment.
Right. Well, you can have more than one comment, can't you?
I suppose I probably could, but I'd rather just keep it to one.
Right, you don't want to flood the system. Yeah, right.
Right. And is this something, Mike, I actually don't know, but is this something like people outside the States can submit?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now on federalregister.gov, and on the comment form, it does have a pull down for country. So,
there you go.
So Australians or other folks are well. Yep, Australia's in there. So you're.
Yes, we exist.
In fact,
yes.
Not only is Australia in there, but Australia is in the short list of countries that are at the top of the list. Yeah, you don't have to scroll down past Austria.
Well, come on, we are part of this Five Eyes agreement.
That's true. That's true.
Yes, we are. We're way up there, so we're good bosom buddies with the
right.
Yep.
Right.
I just sent you guys. Obviously, people can't see this, but I just sent the link over of a potential. I'll link it in, but basically, there's a template kind of what to say, that kind of thing.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, there's a template. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's nice.
please.
I mean, it's just it's very like Dave said, it's very formal. It's not even very formal. It's just very polite.
Yep.
Yeah, it's professional, and it's very important. So.
And no all caps. Okay.
No.
Yeah, right. Double check your caps, folks. Yep. We're all adults here.
Yep. And I
spell out the word "you."
Definitely recommend that people take a look, see what's important to them, make a comment, and be polite, and make sure that you, if you're going to make a case about some point in the rules, like let's say that the particular point about open source versus the software security restrictions. If you're going to talk about that point in particular, try to come up with an example of how what kind of an effect you think that this will have on you or on other people who are citizens of the U.S. or users of the equipment.
I'd argue that your point is pointless without an example.
Yeah.
It's
good point.
it's just hot air. Well, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
No,
why is it,
cite an example, or they won't take you seriously.
Why is it your opinion? How does it affect you? How does it affect other users of the spectrum? and those are the things that they're going to care about.
And that is our community service announcement this week on the air.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't think we've done that yet. I mean, there's
No, we haven't. Oh, it's a new segment.
Hey, speaking of segments, do you want to have a chip of the week?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're way over time, so we'll finish out the show with a chip of the week. Yep.
So I've been doing a new project with the LPC 4300 series microcontrollers, and
It's that NXP?
yeah, and it's the one that's in HackRF1, and and I've been doing this new project because I've been realizing what a wonderful platform it is, and like people need a more general purpose platform for this chip. So this is just it's at first glance it's not all that special. It's an ARM Cortex M4 microcontroller, and M4 is pretty upscale microcontroller. But it's but it's pretty fast.
Dave is yet to program anything on a Cortex anything, so I do know that.
Well, it's fast. It's 32 bits. It's dual core.
It's cheap, probably.
It's
right?
dual core.
Tell us the price, son.
It runs.
Sorry, my the Australian viewers will get that.
Most of the parts in the family, at least the flashless parts, are like in the $5 price range.
$5.
And it's
Dude, that's
Jesus,
nothing.
you can fly to the moon on $5.
One of the wonderful things about this is that it has a very high-performing, high-speed USB controller. And it's hard to find microcontrollers in that price range that do not only full-speed USB but high-speed USB and have the PHY built in. Yep. So you don't have to add an external PHY chip.
Yes.
Right?
Yep,
this is a rare thing. Yep. And it also has some really fascinating programmable peripherals.
And it's got a CAN bus too.
It
well,
does.
no, there's a CAN bus version. Sorry, there's a CAN bus version. I don't think all of them have the CAN.
Yeah, maybe not, but some of them do, definitely.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So it has CAN bus. It has a lot of peripherals, but some of the peripherals that are kind of special are these. There's one called SGPIO and there's one called SCT, the state configurable timer, and they're both these sort of highly configurable state machines that run independently of the CPU. So it kind of gives you the ability to make sort of software-defined peripherals, which...
So like it just kind of like watches for certain bit patterns,
Sure.
stuff like
they
that?
can make their own decisions. They can run their own...
Exactly.
Yeah, they can, it's like a micro within a micro kind of thing.
Yeah. Which is actually one of the concepts that the Low Risk project is really running with. They're going with one of the things that's cool about Low Risk is that they're doing what they call minion cores, which are extra little CPU cores that have like high speed access to their to the GPIO pins, and are just there to be like programmable peripherals. So it's a similar sort of concept in the LPC 4300 series. And I think it's a really cool part. So I'm currently building a board that's basically like a glorified breakout board for the LPC 4300 family, just so that people can have this part on an easy to use board with an expansion interface and a really fast USB interface.
Is it done your site anywhere?
You can get some functionality like that on, say, some of the PIC micros, for example, I'm aware of. You can, you don't have to put this in the code on your micro, but you can actually read a sample from the analog to digital converter and put it into memory, and then it'll at a fixed period, and it'll do that without any code intervention. You just set it up, and it sort of, does that task. Kind of thing. So, really
And
handy.
that's a big part of why that part ended up in HackRF1 in the first place. Because we have pretty high speed analog to digital converters and digital to analog converters, and we have them externally clocked. So we're clocking in and out samples from the microcontroller with an external clock that's not generated and not subject to the jitter that might be produced by the clock generator on the microcontroller.
Got it.
Which package are you using? Are you doing BGA? Or are you doing something else?
For my projects, I'm using the LQFP. It's a 144 pin QFP. It's kind of big, it's 144
Yeah,
pins.
physically big. Yeah, that's a disadvantage.
And they do have some BGAs that are smaller, but
But you can see all the pins.
Right.
You can
In
access
theory,
them.
you can probe them. In theory, you can desolder to them.
Yeah, and if you
you can lift them up, and hack.
In theory,
I like
yes.
to make my designs, if possible. I like to make my designs, something you can assemble with an iron. And
right.
occasionally I run into cases where there really is no solution other than a BGA. Well, that's okay. But if I have the option, I'm going to go with the QFP.
Of course. Good man.
Ah, man, embrace the hot plate.
No,
it is the future.
No,
Chips ain't getting any bigger. I'll tell you that much.
No.
That's why I learned.
It's true.
Self-driving cars and BGAs are not the future. No.
BGAs are not. No. Okay, well, you heard it here first, folks.
They're both evil.
They're both evil. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So yeah,
excellent.
That's true. Yeah.
Tinfoil hats for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Michael, for being on the show again.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's always great to talk to you.
Where can people follow you?
GreatScottGadgets.com or...
Oh, it's a great name.
Oh, thank
Great.
you.
It's just brilliant.
Or at Michael Ossmann on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Yep.
Twitter man.
Or find them at any range of security and hardware companies in the next year. So.
All right. Thanks, mate.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
So, Mike, what's this thing you completely forgot to mention on the show when you were on the show?
I have a new product.
Hey.
I have a new product. It'll be out any day now. Yeah,
I'm really good at that self-promotion thing. So you go to lots of conferences, is that right?
Yeah. Marketing is clearly my strong suit.
Right.
Yeah. Nerds are just hopeless. They're just not competent to run a business. They're just no.
Yardstick
great,
one.
Though.
Yardstick one. It's yet another radio dongle, and it's a low like sub gigahertz low cost wireless interface on a USB dongle. It looks really similar.
Why is it called Yardstick?
Yard stands for yet another radio dongle.
It's easier if you look at it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. No, I'm not looking at it. Okay.
So the number one thing I have to tell people about Yardstick One is it's not software defined radio.
Oh.
Like everybody knows me for doing software defined radio stuff, but this is not software defined radio. It's just a wireless microcontroller on a USB dongle. That's super handy for interfacing with all sorts of low speed digital communication systems like industrial control systems, smart meters, home automation systems, remote keyless entry systems, garage door openers, and all that kind of stuff. So you can actually see Yardstick One featured in the DEF CON talk that was done by Sammy Kamkar recently. So Sammy is somebody that maybe you guys should have on the show sometime. But he's done some interesting work actually with one of our Yardstick One prototypes. So that's a good example of the kind of stuff that you can do with it.
Cool. Nice. Product plug over. Show over.
All right.
Beep. Beep.